let me see if I can give you the gist of this. I was saying that we have now a market-determined agriculture, market-centered agriculture. That farming is centered on the market, and it's limited by the capacities of the technology, which is as far as you can get from J. Russell Smith's idea that you ought to fit the farming to the farm, not the environment, not the region, the farm. And then I was talking about the other possibility that you could have an ecologically centered way of farming that would observe the limits of the place as its necessary limits. There's certain things on this farm that you mustn't do, and of course that raises lots of questions about how to have a culture and keep it going. A lot of it has to do with memory. How are you going to keep the succession of farmers on this farm informed of its limits? How are we going to do that? We've not thought about it. We're going to have to think about it. And I said that market value is always an illusion. Any market value is an illusion. And the way you know it is an illusion is because it changes all the time. We was talking about land in central Illinois being worth $13,000 an acre. No farmer probably can afford that, but probably the old people in certain parts of Illinois can remember when it was $50 an acre. And I was suggesting that if we are ever going to deal with nature in the right way, and our world in the right way, and our places in it in the right way, we're going to have to come to deal with the idea that some things are of absolute value. The land would be a thing of absolute value. Can't be touched by any price. If you don't have any, it's worth everything. Food is a thing of absolute value. And the way you know it is, if you don't have it, it's worth everything. And so I said that there are two ways that you can define that you can come to understand that absoluteness of value is revealed to is need, for one thing, and affection for the other. You value your children, your loved ones, and so on because of your affection, not because of their market value or their lifetime worth to you as collaborators or whatever.
And if you have that affection, then you can begin to have a conversation. And Wendell's talked about a conversation with nature. And that if you have, to have a conversation, you have to respect the otherness of the other. And what you get back doesn't always square with what you thought, but it informs the next question, and that's kept going as a result of affection. You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about the necessity for a sustainable green revolution. And a fair number of friends I was in graduate school with in genetics in North Carolina went off to help make the last green revolution. And the whole thing was predicated on bushels and acres. And as a consequence, a lot of farmers in India, Asia, Africa, Latin America, mostly in India, had to purchase the inputs, and they'd have a crop failure, and they lost their farms. Vandana Shiva's talked a lot about this. And so the social justice wasn't there, And then the large farmers weren't there with the affection that had been there in the original relationships. So what I think is possible, and I think as a derivative, is that, well, just imagine, for instance, who won't be interested in the seed houses, or a perennial polyculture, the fertilizer people, because we're going to have biological nitrogen fixation. And with species diversity, you have chemical diversity. So it takes a tremendous enzyme system on the part of an insect or a pathogen to give you the epidemic. The farm machinery people, there'll be fewer passes. You just keep harvesting. All right, now the reward goes to the farmer and the landscape rather than the suppliers of inputs, and therefore social justice is a derivative of the ecosystem concept. You see? So it all comes back to this having I mean, our subject here is affection, among other things. So, well, I'll stop there.
Well, if you have affection, you're going to employ a lot more of your mind, a lot more of your faculties than you will if you don't have it. I got a letter not very long ago. Seems to me that maybe this is the way of conversation. I'm going to run this out and see where it intersects with some other things that have been said. I got a letter from a fellow who was raised on a small farm in the hills of northern Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, one of those counties, poor tobacco farm. Grew up ashamed of his rural background, the way his family talked, the way they looked, the way he talked, embarrassed. And he went away, and he had a number of fairly predictable experiences, got educated, among other things, and got hooked on dope, got cured by some people who were mighty tough on him, he said, but they saved his life. And he said it's very strange to him to hear people say, well, manufacturing followed agriculture, and he's talking about the kind of agriculture he grew up in. People went from that to factory jobs, and now they're asking what comes after manufacturing. He said, I know what comes after manufacturing, dope. And they're, manufacturing dope all over the rural landscape now. And that's because they're no longer fully employed. They're using their minds only as pieces of equipment for working in a factory. And then they're not using them at all, except to screw up with dope. So, one of the industrialization of agriculture has deprived us maybe most seriously. It's deprived us of a lot of land, a lot of farming know-how, but it's deprived us of the use of so many people's minds. Farmers are farming now by reading the instructions on their equipment, not looking at their land, not trying to think of what's best here for this particular piece of ground. But we need that intelligence. We've got a culture now that's telling you that only a college-educated mind is worth anything. And the more degrees it's got, the more worth it has, and that sort of thing. All that's really wrong. Education's been badly oversold by the people who have it for sale, as you would expect. But I think about that letter, And I think he's proud of his old uncle now, who's still at work in his 80s, still observant of the landscape, knows what's still there, knows the things that are gone, the wildlife and so on. Now he's proud of him. But he gave up his chance to have that kind of mind, but that kind of mind is needed. So it's not just that we've got to think of the environment as, I think your word is the mosaic, the ecological mosaic, but it's even more refined than that. It's the mosaic of little places all over the country that have to be intimately known to be kindly used. And that calls, you see, for breaking up this mass that we call the population into locally adapted people.